Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2 has been released, and with that comes my monthly tier list breaking down the weakest to strongest within the season. I've broken down the other seasons in other videos, so be sure to check that out before going into this, as I'm only talking about the scaling within Part 2 or the characters that are relevant in this part. So for those who are wondering, where is Anthony LaRusso? Yeah, go check out the other videos. Anyway, let's not waste any time and discuss the bottom of the barrel, that being the D tier. In D tier, from weakest to strongest, we have Devin, Dimitri, Maria, Diego, and Kenny. Devin performed the worst out of anyone in the Sekai Tekai, and I don't think anybody really disagrees with this, with her best feat being that she sacrificed herself against the captain who eliminated Sam. Devin is just stated to be the worst performing member of Miyagi-Do as well, and it was implied that she really shouldn't have even been on the team in the first place, but even despite this, she did show off the ability to semi-scrap with other relevant characters like Yoon and Tori, so it's not that she's fodder, but more so the worst of the best. Dimitri is here because other than Devin, he is just blatantly the worst performing member in the entire tournament. He knocked out Eli and thought he could beat Diego and then just lost right after while getting caught off guard, and the best thing he really contributed honestly was the 3v1 against Yoon Do-jin. But out of Kenny and Hawk, he probably did the worst, with the only thing that really keeps him from not being bottom one is his intelligence and Devin's performance. I have a lot more to say about Dimitri, but I'll save that for his own video. Anyway, Maria and Diego have shown the ability to kind of fight Sam, and plus Diego just blatantly beats Dimitri, so if I'm being honest, they could go higher, but I decided to place them here due to their lack of showings. Kenny I'm going to be placing at the top of this tier, as he not only defeated the captain by himself, but the same one who was also able to not do completely horrible against Robbie. It's also implied by Yoon's actor that he was honestly still in control of the fight with Hawk and Dimitri, and although it would have been a little bit harder for him to score a point on Hawk, he thought he had a chance, but it wasn't until Kenny caught him off guard where he ultimately fumbled.
Half of that section, I think Yoon was like pretty in control. He knew what he was doing. He felt like he could definitely win a point either in transition or at least against one of those two. You know, I think Hawk would have been a little harder to get that point in, but he felt like he could definitely do it with Gianni, with Dimitri. But as soon as Dallas comes in and they're doing that rapid switching, I think Yoon stayed in it just a tad too long.
So Kenny catching him off guard was a bigger contribution to Dimitri in the whole fight, which is honestly kind of sad. We went over in the last season anyway how all of these guys are relative regardless, so this is just me kind of picking out the bottom of the barrel. Now in the next tier, we start to get some more relevant characters like the Thunder Captain who was scrapping with Sam, Hawk, Sam herself, and Yoon Do-jin. The Thunder Captain was able to initially beat Sam during the elimination round, with Hawk then avenging her while dealing with someone else. Sam as well blatantly beats her in the finale, so I think placing her at the bottom of this tier is fair. Hawk, in all honesty, is probably the one character who is the closest to the power couples in power. We even see Hawk landing hits on Quan like how Miguel and Robbie initially were. Hawk, despite getting clowned on a lot in the later seasons, is still very powerful, and if I'm being honest, him versus Sam was a lot closer than people think. But I would still give it to Samantha, as she not only has closer scaling to characters like Tori, but she also was shown the ability to scrap with Yoon, who just blatantly full Hawk. And it got so bad for Hawk that he ended up needing Dimitri and Kenny to wear him down in order to beat him. And like I mentioned previously, Yoon's actor does admit that it would have been pretty hard for Yoon to get a point here, but there was still a chance even with Hawk as a factor. And the moment Kenny threw that Markiplier punch was the point where Yoon was off balance. Some of you may point out to part 1 scaling and how Quan just no-diffed him, so therefore Hawk should be above Yoon because he's closer to the other characters, right? But we actually get an explanation as to why Quan beat Yoon so badly, and that was because he mastered Kim's teachings to the T, thus making him very predictable and easy to bring down. And after this, Yoon's actor does imply that he's a lot more hungry after this fight and is amped up by this loss.
You see like the super structured, very like by the rules Yoon. Part 2 is like, I think he's just a bit angrier, a bit raw, and I think and has a chip on his shoulder, something to prove in the fights, and I think that kind of shows up pretty clearly with his 607 fight, and I also with the 609, the multiple man brawl fight with Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai.
So, funnily enough, this Quan fight means nothing to Yoon scaling in part 2, and this guy is just a beast. But in the next tier, we have characters who are fighting for top 4 in the tournament, but just aren't quite up to par yet with those characters, that being Zara and Tori. Now, Tori and Zara are here mainly due to Tori no longer being mentally nerfed or held back by the fact that Sam is her friend. This would mean any interaction that Tori had with Sam previously in the tournament was her holding back, and Tori by the end of the tournament managed to channel her anger to its peak. And I'm placing Zara here because she no-diffs the same Tori that was scrapping with Sam, and then Tori manages to get so much stronger that Zara ends up having to jump her in order to try and have an advantage. So while yes, Zara initially embarrassing Tori is a very impressive feat, Tori by the end of part 2 should be better than ever, with her just cracking the top 5. And honestly, out of any character, she probably has the best power progression. But with that aside, let's now talk about the Elite 4 of this tourney. In A tier, we have Quan, Miguel, Robbie, and Axel. Miguel versus Quan is a video I've made, so I won't spend too much time talking about this topic. So, long story short, Quan in a point v point setting is better than Miguel, but by the end of part 2, Miguel should be closer to Robbie and Axel than Quan is. Not only was Miguel holding his ground for a longer period of time against Axel, but Robbie literally 2v1s Quan and Yun and wins, with the only time Quan gets any advantage on Robbie is while he's off guard. So, if I could put it into one sentence, Miguel should be better than Quan by the end of the tournament because he's closer to the other two characters that managed to beat Quan. But above these two, of course, are Robbie, who is without a doubt the strongest Miyagi-Do fighter when he's locked in, and as we saw in their fight, Axel was dominating pretty badly, with the only thing Robbie could really do was keep up defensively.
Yeah, I would just say he's surprised that he's not, like, I think he's not going at it maybe with 100% force because he's assuming it's going to be easier. And then when Robbie's like blocking everything and they're sort of having, it's like a little more evenly matched than he thinks it is, he's sort of like, okay, like what the heck? That's when Sensei Wolf yells and he kind of kicks it into high gear.
This guy is called the Jiren of the Cobra Kai series, and rightfully so. He is without a doubt the strongest student in Iron Dragon and is the strongest student in the entire tournament. And now with the students out of the way, let's talk about the adults, which is very easy to break down. In order, we have Kim, Terry, Kreese, Chosen, Daniel and Johnny, and lastly Wolf. Kim before part 2 didn't really have scaling, with the only thing we could really say is maybe she's above the 5 senseis that fought Mike, Johnny, and Chosen, but this was just sort of headcanon and never confirmed. A lot of you may say that she scales to Chosen, but if I'm being honest, this isn't the most convincing scaling considering they were attracted to each other, and so for that reason she is the weakest sensei, with Terry now being below Kreese. Yes, I know Terry was going to win their fight, but bro literally had to rap by blindsiding him, and if they were in an open field or an area that wasn't advantageous for Silver, Kreese would just be better in a straight up one-on-one. This makes sense with the narrative considering that Kreese is no longer being held back by Johnny and he implies that he can now take him down, and this is the same guy who dropped Terry on his neck, so it should just mean Kreese is better than Terry. Chosen is here for not only beating Terry solo, but he's just closer to the other two senseis who beat Terry individually as well. Daniel and Johnny are stated to be equals in this season, so you can put one over the other, it honestly doesn't matter, and obviously Wolf is top 1 due to 2v1ing Daniel and Johnny and low-key winning the entire interaction. And for those who are going to mention him, because I know they're going to be like, well, technically he was in part 2, Prime Miyagi would be top 1, and yes, he would be above Wolf, as nobody could have stopped Miyagi in his prime besides maybe Master Kim, stated by the writers. And for more info on that topic, check out Bokusi's video on the matter, since I honestly don't really need to make it, he just did it for me. And with that aside, I'm going to see you guys during part 3, where I will be breaking down all versions of the characters, more than likely in a video or in a live stream format. Thank you so much for watching the tier list, and I'll see you guys soon.